let me, this is the demand for oil, the U.S. demand, the supply of oil. Now, in the United States,
That's for the crude?
let's look at the crude first.
Okay.
So, let's say this is the world price of oil. So U.S. domestic demand exceeds U.S. domestic supply, right? Like here. So there is this is imported into the United States. So now what this plan says, let's say the world price of oil is $100 a barrel. Now let's say the world price falls $5. The idea is to slip in a $5 tariff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that the U.S. domestic consumer won't notice. So at a point when the world price of oil falls, you introduce a tariff. So this is the new plus the tariff. Now this will reduce the quantity demanded, will increase the quantities produced in the United States.
Yeah, of course.
So the U.S. production will increase by this from there to there, because now they will get a better price, so they'll be able to bring more fields to production, while the demand will also fall, although the short-run demand not so much because it's more inelastic.
Yeah.
Inelastic, right? So with a tariff, the U.S. government will raise all this revenue. So the imports will be limited from this amount to this amount.
Okay.
So this tariff will bring in, let's say, this amount of revenue to the government. Now the oil industry in the United States will benefit because the quantity of oil produced will increase, the
Price is higher.
and the price will be higher.
So the revenue is higher.
Yeah, the tariff is an import tariff, so they'll be able to charge $105 a barrel.
That's according to the law of one price, that prices must match when it comes to oil.
That's right. The world price of oil is going to be one, but what will be taxed is the imports. So the exporters of oil in
The local ones are not affected.
the local ones are not affected. See, this is not an sales tax that applies to all,
It's import.
whether
Okay.
domestically produced or imported. A tariff targets the importers, the exporters. Okay, so the foreigners will pay the tariff, not the domestic producers. So this is going to be an increase in revenue for the American producer. Remember the concept of consumer and producer surplus?
Yeah.
Well, the producer surplus will increase by this amount. Increase in producer surplus. The consumer surplus, however,
There's none, because for the consumer, the final price is the same.
that's right. So it's not shown clearly here, but the consumer surplus, it's shown here that it will be reduced. But if you introduce the tariff once the if the world price was initially 105, falls to 100, and then you add the tariff, then the consumer surplus will not have been affected.
Okay.
So no impact on consumer surplus. So consumer surplus is not reduced, but producer surplus is induced. And you make the foreign, make those Arabs pay, kind of thing, you know the way the Americans think. So,
but is there a social loss?
Social loss?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't ask here for the consumer or producer surplus, huh? Does it?
No.
Benefits who?
Okay.
Who gets
Suppose
the benefit?
benefits solely
why?
on imported crude in an integrated world economy. Who will bear the burden of the import tariff?
Okay.
Who will benefit? Why? What will be the longer-term consequence? So, who will benefit? The exporters, the other countries. They will. Now, what will be the long-term consequences? Well, one of the long-term consequences is that they might not want to sell you oil. They might want to, basically to retaliate in another way, put tariffs on American aircraft. They'll buy aircraft from France instead of the United States.
Yeah.
So if I was a senator who works for the interests of Boeing and Lockheed Martin, who make the jets, and the Saudi ambassador says, you fucked us here, but we're considering, we're going to Paris, we're considering buying French Mirage. Then I'll run to here and say, take out the tariff away because we're going to lose the contracts, right? I mean, that's how. If a $10 barrel tariff were levied on imported refined products, but no tariff were levied on crude oil, okay, who would bear the burden of such a tariff?
In that case, is the final consumer.
If a $10 tariff were levied on imported refined products.
That's gasoline, basically.
Or plastics.
Or, yeah. But the major one is gasoline.
If a $10 barrel were levied on imported refined products. Now, if we redo the same graph, but for refined products, the price of refined products could fall too by the same amount of tax. So whether it's a crude or refined, the oil refineries would benefit by raising their price.
The final product will cost more.
But they will raise the price, but the money doesn't go to them.
You see, because if the price of refined products were to fall, part of the price of the refined product is the crude oil. If crude oil prices fall, gasoline prices fall. So if they add,
But this is for protect refineries in USA, no?
So it would protect refineries in the USA. So I think it's the same effect, whether you're charging the crude
or the refined product.
The only difference is that when you're protecting the crude, you're protecting the oil industry in the United States that extracts the oil. When protecting the refined product, you're providing more protection for the refineries, for the manufacturing side of the industry. I would say same effect. Only that now the benefit goes to more of the benefit goes to the refiners instead of the crude oil industry.
But you don't think that the consumer will have to pay a higher price?
Well, the way what they're saying here is if the international price came down, fell, and instead of letting the lower price flow into the country, you taxed it, you introduced a tariff, the consumer wouldn't notice.
But is there an opportunity cost for...
Well, there is an opportunity cost because the consumer would have saved money.
Yeah.
the consumer would have been able to buy it for less.
Yeah.
Now here you're saying that the consumer will not pay more, but the consumer would have saved money, but you're preventing the consumer from saving money.
Mhm.
On the other hand, you're contributing to your domestic producer and generating revenue for the government to reduce the deficit. So that's the trade-off.
Okay.
So in other words, it's an indirect way to tax the American citizen to reduce the deficit. Okay?
Yep, mhm.
That's how, I mean, what would be the economic consequence of the combined $5 on imported crude and $10 tariff on refined oil products? The combined economic consequences. Economic consequences of the combined. If they combine them, how would these tariffs affect domestic consumers, oil producers, refiners, companies competing against importers and exporters? So if they did it both, for both oil and crude and gasoline, with refined products, it's a different country that is affected than the crude oil, right?
Why? Because
Nigeria, let's say, sells crude oil, but not necessarily refined.
Refine it. Yeah.
okay,
So
They're
you're
affected
hitting
in
a
different people.
different party.
okay.
It's not all, they're not all, you see, some countries only export crude oil, not refined products.
Mhm.
Other countries export refined products. So the impact would be more limited with refined products because you will affect fewer countries
Okay.
than crude. Crude will affect all the countries that export to the United States, I would say. Companies competing against imports and exporters. How would these proposed import levies affect foreign suppliers to the United States of crude oil and refined products? How would these proposed import levies affect foreign suppliers to the United States? Foreign suppliers to the United States of crude oil and refined products. How would these it would damage their interests, and they would looking for ways to retaliate.
Yeah.
As we said, I mean,
That's the bottom line.
during the 70s, price controls on crude oil, but not on refined products, were in effect in the United States. During the 70s, price controls on crude oil, but not refined. On the basis of your previous analysis, what differences would you expect to see between heating oil and gasoline prices in New York and in Rotterdam? I'm not too sure about this one. Now, this is from which course?
International finance.
International finance. It's a nice question. President Carter lectures the foreign exchange markets. If you
That's
scan
another
it,
case.
If you scan it and send it me, I can give it some more thought.
Okay.
And if you look at in the 70s, price controls, President Canute.
But this is a very good start because we were like going over and over and over, and I knew that the right approach was a graphic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
to
it
have
is.
and it is.
Because this is, this is what these graphs, they help organize your thought. They help organize your thinking. That's what they do, because they're not perfectly accurate. I mean, they cannot capture everything. And how you draw the lines and so forth depends in turn on other assumptions. But at least it gives you a starting point to start thinking around and asking the right questions.